Hey everyone, it's Chrono from the Headphone Show. Today's video is a little different because it's not really a review, but instead I wanted to talk about one of the few headphones that I reviewed in the past and actually purchased, and that is the Sennheiser HD800S. Okay, so as I mentioned a second ago, I've already reviewed the HD800S, and I believe that I filmed the video for this headphone almost 2 years ago, so it was like in October of 2020. Of course, if you're interested in checking that video out, the link to my original review will be in the description down below. And in this video, I want to share maybe some insight into what drew me to this headphone, while also sharing some of the pros and cons of the HD800S, so that maybe you can decide if it's a good fit for you as well. Let's start out with the cons. So I should mention that I believe that the HD800S is a very well built headphone in terms of the materials used and the care with which it's assembled. However, there are two things about this chassis that I do find to be somewhat bothersome. The first and more minor one is the silver screen that surrounds the driver on the exterior side of the ear cups. At a glance, it may look like it's a solid piece, but it's actually more of a mesh-like material. And the problem with this design element is that it's quite prone to getting dents and scratches if it's not handled with care. So at least for me, it feels like every time I pick up the headphone, I gotta be very mindful about trying to avoid touching that part of the headphone and only grabbing it from the black plastic parts. The more serious problem I have with the HD800S and its current design, and this is something that I pointed out in my original review, are the connector sockets for the driver, which are really easy to break. Some might remember that I actually broke my original review unit of the HD800S because I tried removing the cables from the headphone side and the entire jack assembly came out, which of course meant that I could no longer use one of the drivers in the headphone. And the problem is that the socket assembly isn't properly secured to the headphone, and when you factor in the really tight, almost locked fit of the ODU connectors that the HD800S uses, it makes it very easy to basically pull the entire socket assembly out. So it's definitely something to keep in mind if you know you like swapping out cables, or if you need to replace the stock one at some point in the future. Then, as far as sound goes, there's one thing that really stands out on the HD800S to me, and that is the poor bass performance that it delivers. It doesn't just have a very low bass shelf that rolls off towards a lower frequency, so you don't get as much sub bass under around 50 to 40 hertz, but the bass quality itself isn't the greatest. When compared to some of its other open back peers, like, the Clear, the LCDX, the Aria, the HD800S's bass just lacks a certain level of refinement and precision that other headphones in this price bracket tend to deliver, and even less expensive headphones like the LCD2 or the Hi-Fi Man Ananda, those tend to have much tighter bass responses. So while you can boost the bass with an analog bass boost or an EQ upshelf, it's something I don't really find myself doing that often anymore. I actually halved the bass boost I originally had on my HD800S EQ preset from plus 5 dB to plus 2.5 dB. And that's just because even if you boost the bass, it's not really of the highest quality. But anyways, let's now talk about the things that I like about the HD800S, because despite of its poor bass quality, I'm just gonna say this is my favorite open back headphone. And yes, this is after listening to the LCD5 and the Hi-Fi Man Susvara. No HE1 yet, but Sennheiser, I suppose I'll begin by talking about its technical qualities, and really there are few headphones that I think deliver better performance than the HD800S in any price bracket. It simply has exceptional detail retrieval that seems to perfectly surface all the intricate vocal and instrument tones, creating a pristine image of the music. Then there's of course the HD800S's Soundstage and Imaging capabilities, and in my experience, I haven't heard any other headphone that delivers as good a performance as the HD800S can in this regard. Its soundstage is very open and expansive. It feels wide but also naturally spacious. To me, it doesn't really feel exaggerated at all. Additionally, the imaging is unbelievably accurate, as it easily delineates the positioning and directionality of sound, which, by the way, also happens to make these, I think, the ultimate gaming headset. It's just outstanding for that application. On the note of gaming though, I should probably mention or caution that of the open backs I've tried, this is one of the ones that leaks the most sound. So when gaming online, I tend to hear a lot more complaints about my music leaking into the microphone if I'm not on push to talk or muted. So I guess that's probably something I should have brought up in the cons section, but we're here now. Bass aside, I also really like the tonality of the HD800S. As expected from an open back Sennheiser headphone, the mids here are exceptionally well tuned, with rich fundamental tones that are properly contoured by the present, yet not shouty, upper mid-range. While the treble in the original HD800 was quite spicy, I don't actually have any severe issues with the HD800's treble. It does have a slight peak at around 5.5K, which can introduce a little bit of low treble sibilance, but aside from that, I think that the treble here is well tempered and it has very good extension to the upper treble range above 10K, so you do get some nice air qualities there. Lastly, there's comfort, and even now I think that the HD800S is the most comfortable headphone I've ever worn, and that's thanks primarily to the incredibly spacious inner diameter of the pads, as well as the low clamp, lightweight build. It's a very easy wear, even in nearly day-long listening sessions. As you can probably tell by now, there are many things that I really love about the HD800S, and aside from its bass, I don't have any major gripes with it. I think that it's very impressive that even after all these years, the HD800S still delivers some of the very best performance you'll find in headphones, and it does so at what I think is a very competitive price. 2 years after originally purchasing it, this is a headphone that I really enjoy listening to, one that I use as my high-end standard or reference, and one that I thoroughly recommend to anyone who's looking for flagship headphones. One last note, I'm not usually one to mention genre pairings, but I have on occasion gotten some questions regarding what genres I'd like to use the HD800S for, and well, I think that it falls flat for things like EDM, lo-fi music, and maybe rap, but I really love their sound for rock, jazz, classical music, and pretty much anything that's acoustic as well. Anyways, that is all for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video or found it useful. If you'd like to learn more about the HD800S or many other headphones, I highly encourage you to check out the review section available on headphones.com. For more headphone audio content, stay tuned by subscribing to The Headphone Show here on YouTube, and until next time, this is Chrono signing off.